PJD is a reasonable process in the body. It is in fact an adaptation and response to physical stress and how to recognize its precursors. He will talk about preventive measures, self-management options, and professional interventions. He's a doctor of chiropractic and a diplomate in acupuncture. He currently practices in Ajijic and is a lecturer for sports medicine of Mexico and in manual procedures. Please welcome Victor Youcha, and he can add to what I may have missed.
Thank you, Jim. This is kind of fun and exciting. I'm really excited to be here in Ajijic. Linda, my wife, and I moved over from the coast, La Peñita de Jaltemba. Anybody recognize that? Rincon de Guayabitos. We lived there for 4.5 years. Part of the time I was doing my required social service for a Mexican chiropractic license in Tepic. Little scary at times. I only heard the gunshots once, but you know, that's enough for a lifetime. I'm a 1979 graduate of Northwestern College of Chiropractic, and this journey in healthcare started before that. I worked in a psychiatric hospital, got interested in massage and touch, and just interested in us, you know. The walk as a supposed healer is really a walk of discovery about the wonders of creation and the fact that everybody I put my hands on, I'm touching your body, and hopefully we're having soul-to-soul contact. And so understanding how this well, partially one of my favorite new words in Mexico is the calaca. Anybody hear that word before? I had setting up my office, and 2 Mexican kids are out in front looking in the window. Mama, mira la calaca. They were seeing the skeleton, you know. And that's not, you know, as a chiropractor, we start with the focus on the skeleton, but then gradually over the years of, especially the spine, over the years you learn that we're not just the skeleton, and that every part of the body affects every other part of the body. We really are mind, body, spirit units, and a dysfunction in one part really affects and causes dysfunctions in the other one. With my patients, I call myself the posture police. I am the... Hello? Okay, the posture police. And so, I mean, I think it's my job to help get people upright. That's what I was really taught in school, but it's been a gradual process of really understanding why. Why does this produce all the problems that it does all the way down to the feet? And we'll do a little experiment later on as I get through. But we're not just a bunch of bones. We are connected. You know, in terms of the musculoskeletal system is 65% of the body, muscles and bones. 65%, that's pretty high up there. And so we really need, if it is not well, the rest of us is not well. And so we're going to look at the spine a little bit. We're going to look at the discs. We're going to think about how we're all connected. So we are sheets of connective tissue called fascia that connect from our heads all the way down to our feet. And what happens in the fascia at the top end or the bottom end affects the opposite end. And fascia is a living tissue. When I was studying, we really thought, okay, it's a bunch of collagen, it's a bunch of dead fibers. Well, in recent times we have learned, first of all, it's very richly endowed with nerves. It is a sensory apparatus, as I think all of us is. And fascia is also recently discovered impregnated with muscle cells, with smooth muscle cells, not skeletal muscle like we have in our muscles, but like we have in our intestines. It is a contractile tissue. So with nerves and with muscle, it responds to stress by contracting. So that's part of our tightness. And then, you know, we really do want to talk about degenerative disease, and tissue repair. You know, a structure, this pole, for instance, if it were under stress, enough stress would break it. You and I, fortunately, well, if it's a sudden enough stress, it will break. We do break bones, and that is dependent on the strength of our bones and the flexibility. This pole will break. We repair. There's a law called Wolff's Law, and Wolff's Law has to do with the deposition of calcium and change of bone repair due to the electrical changes which are resultant from the stress. And so we have these wonderful powers of recuperation. If we can alter the stress on our joints, on our dysfunctional joints, on our degenerative joints, they will heal to some extent. Can you unboil a hard-boiled egg? No. But you don't know how hard-boiled it is until you really attempt to heal it in these living bodies. Because the hard-boiled egg is actually not still living. You know, we take a pre-chicken, we cook it, it's never going to be a chicken. And so, you know, to move along about degenerative joint disease, I think the more you understand it, the more you'll be able to involve yourself in healing yourself. Surely, because I'm not using it anyway. And as Jim mentioned, degenerative joint disease, in my view, is a reasonable process. There is cause and effect. In the physical world, and I like to think about spiritual worlds and physical worlds. In the physical world, we're subject to the laws of gravity and all kinds of physical laws. And therefore, we are subject in every way to cause and effect. There's always a cause. Do we understand the cause? If we don't understand the cause in medicine, it is idiopathic. Idiopathic? I don't know if it's idiotic. I just don't know. And so when I was in chiropractic college, they talked about scoliosis. It was always idiopathic. Over my years of looking at scoliosis patients, so many of them have a significantly anatomically short leg, like me. Now, why didn't I get a severe scoliosis? If you look at me from behind, now I have a lift in my shoe that's about 1 centimeter, but I'm still, I like the term in Mexico. Anybody know this term? Chueco? Who knows chueco? Okay. You know, or in Minnesota, where I lived and worked with my wife, Linda, kitty wampus. So I'm born kitty wampus. So when I hear people say, oh, my parents had it, the arthritis, and everybody in our family we inherited arthritis, I don't think so. I think we still are subject to the laws of cause and effect. I inherited the short leg. No amount of chiropractors, or maybe the Russians developed a treatment that can lengthen a short leg. I'm not interested in it, though. They actually do separate. They cut up the leg and they put these gadgets in to lengthen it. And for some people whose leg is really short, it's a miracle. The real miracle, though, is that we're here, we're alive, walking on this planet. So degenerative joint disease really is, this was really outlined in the beginning in the spine by a doctor from the university, a Canadian, Saskatchewan, Kirkaldy Willis. Anybody from Saskatchewan? Welcome. Nice to see you all. We had a lot of students coming from Saskatchewan to our Northwestern College of Chiropractic, some really super students. And they could tolerate the cold of Minnesota better than I could. Anyway, so Kirkaldy Willis outlined dysfunction, instability, and stabilization. Degenerative joint disease, arthritis, is a process of the body towards stabilizing unstable joints resultant from dysfunction. Make sense? Should. If I'm talking nonsense, say, hey, Youcha, you're talking nonsense. So, Dysfunction, what is it? Well, dysfunction, somebody further down the line will talk about it as improper strategies of compression around the joint. Now, this is a little bit later thought by Andre Vleming, a Belgian physiologist and specialist in low back pain, really coined that term, strategies of compression. However, we start with, and this comes from a chiropractic viewpoint, or many people that work in manual medicine. And I'll talk a little bit about some differences in manual medicine and chiropractic. Chiropractors do manual medicine, but not as generally as a lot of manual medicine people. Hypomobility, a loss of mobility in the joint, results in synovitis, inflamed synovium. The synovium is the surrounding tissue. It's a lining inside the joint capsule that actually produces synovial fluid, which acts as a lubricant in the joint. And then in the spine, we see disc tears. And then instability, second phase. Now, what's really important to understand is all of these phases really occur when we have this one and this one. We are definitely well immersed in dysfunction. And you can have right away and immediately, once you start being unstable, the instability phase, the body really works towards stabilization right away. So we're actually able to see within 2 weeks after an injury in a car accident, you will see, I'm kind of cutting in and out. Is that me?
Okay.
It's my electricity dysfunctioning with this. Okay, dysfunction. Here we go. And anyway, these can occur together, but inside those joints, we actually start to see adhesions starting to connect the joints, intra-articular adhesions, like somebody injected glue inside the joints. And I was at a conference in Monterey, and somebody, a physician, illustrated this. He actually had photos, but he would only give us drawings of it. He wouldn't cut loose with the photos. Somebody else is publishing on it, and so I couldn't get my hands on it to share with people yet. But I'm sure we'll see the paper at some point about the interarticular adhesions. So what this tells us is a very important concept in dealing with degeneration, preventing degeneration, responding to dysfunction, is if we mobilize something very quickly or for too long after an injury, intra-articular adhesions occur. Okay, so important concept in dealing with, okay, where's the speaker there? in dealing with life in general. Movement is life. Life is movement. And in particular, so when we lay down, when we stop moving, we're on our way to less movement. And so those of you that are struggling with arthritis, we know the new buzz, the zumbido, in Spanish that's buzz, right? The zumbido is activate, activate, activate. Strengthen, strengthen. And mobilize, mobilize. So we wind up with capsular laxity. We do wind up with also changes around the instability in the surrounding soft tissues. In the disc, we see herniation and internal disruption and resorption of the disc material. Process towards stabilizing. And then within stabilization, we see the bone spurs, the osteophytes, right? They're buttresses. Anybody remember from your European history, they built the churches with the flying buttresses? That's to what? Hold up the wall. Well, a bone spur is really a buttress to hold up and stabilize an unstable joint. What's an unstable joint? Well, part of it is, in a dysfunctional joint, is a joint where, scientific term, instantaneous axis of rotation is altered. Every joint has its rotation around several planes. All the directions of movement, in every direction. We have a normal axis of rotation. Then when it's altered, the marvelous thing about your body is that, I talked about it before, you are full of sensors. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The sensors, actually the fascia, the ligaments, the tendons, the muscles, everything is a sensor, sends input back into the central nervous system. We call them mechanoreceptors. They respond to deformation of tissue, stretching, compression, blah, blah, okay? So, what dysfunction means, according to Vleming in Belgium, is the compression strategy of the joint is inappropriate for the joint situation, for how it's being used at a particular time in bearing weight, or whatever function, because we see lots of arthritis and degenerative changes in the hands. Where does that come from? I used to work with a lot of farmers and even people that used to milk like this. Well, you should have seen their hands, you know, in northern Minnesota. So for the joint situation, and it results in, where does it come from? It comes from different types of trauma. A trauma overwhelms the normal function and strategy of compression of the joint. Micro traumas. This is where the posture comes in. It's important, and a little further down I'll explain it in more detail, but you need to know your body changes according to the demands you put on it. We remodel, we build new tissue, we break down old tissue. So, overuse, excess weight, underuse. You know, I can't tell you the significant number of patients that I see that are in trouble because of deconditioning. Deconditioning. A weak back is a painful back. So we deal with what's called fixation or hypermobility. Fixation is a loss of mobility, and hypermobility is too much. You can actually have them both in the same joint. In one direction, because there's fixation, in another direction, you will have exaggerated movement and a changed, what I said before, instantaneous axis of rotation. Then the body wants to stabilize it. You with me? Makes sense, doesn't it? I didn't invent this. I wish I invented something, you know. So degeneration, again, what is it? Spurs, worn cartilage is the body's attempt to stabilize. Inflammation, I want people to really think about inflammation. I want you to think about what it is, really recognize what it is. Inflammation is the body's process towards repair. Body wants to fix itself. We bring in lots of blood, we bring in fluids, we bring in repair cells. This is inflammation. It's the healing process. We want to think about that, okay? So if I suddenly have some inflammation, does that mean I need anti-inflammatories? The truth? Maybe sometimes. Okay, sometimes inflammation gets out of hand, but in fact, the current most of the current anti-inflammatories interfere with the healing process and in the long term result in further degeneration. I think it's really important to understand that. Prolonged inflammation means continued dysfunction, also continued pain. But it means we haven't got to the cause. It means that we haven't straightened out the dysfunction. Fix the dysfunction is really the key. So we have an ongoing problem in the foot, fasciitis, pain in the foot. Well, you know, if I'm bearing weight like this, let's try an experiment for a second. Whoever wants to stand up could stand up. I want you to experiment with your posture. I want you to stand up really super straight. Hey, you know, don't trust anything I say or anybody says. You know what? We have to know through our own beings and experience. Okay, Now, everyone, as straight as you can be. Now, get yourself into a comfortable slouch where you're used to hanging out, you know? Now, I want you to put your attention into your feet. Feel your feet. Put your mind in your feet. Feel how you bear weight on your feet, on your forefoot, on your heel. Where is it? Okay. Now stand up straight again. Feel the change? Okay, most of you do. And so, where does fasciitis come from? Where do all these foot problems come from? Altered posture all the way up here. Vladimir Janda, Czechoslovakian doctor, physiologist, neurologist, died a few years ago, really talked about this. He described this as called the upper crust syndrome, and described it as producing problems in the knees, hips, neck, shoulders, every place, just from that. Altered biomechanics. And so, one of the first clues to healing arthritis or degenerative disease is whatever we can to recover our posture, to get upright again. Actually, I've got this little thing. I'm going to pass them out for all you all to share, and some of you can keep them. Here, we'll put them this way. And actually, this one, I got a picture of this one in the mail, and it was about a colleague, though a little letter, who had a stroke and is actually supporting himself by producing this. Are you de-evolving? And many of us see this. You know, so the struggle in life to prevent all of these kinds of changes, first of all, is decide, be aware, get upright. As my mother would say, don't be no slouch. And that's true, and you know, that's one of the things that really sticks with me. So the body is always trying to repair itself with inflammation is the only way that we really have. So if we shut it off, first of all, the anti-inflammatories, you know, like I said, sometimes they're really necessary. I've even used them myself. But if you use them for any amount of time, then they produce iatrogenic effects. They produce all kinds of stomach disorders, bleeding disorders. They plug up your blood vessels. They plug up your blood vessels. They result in cardiovascular disease. Anybody else hear that? Who's heard about that? Okay, I'm not the only one. There was a real popular one that was killing a bunch of people with hypertension. And I get these training letters. I exercise. And I swing kettlebells, Russian kettlebells. One of these days, we'll do a little group on the Russian kettlebells. But the instructor talked about, actually, here's this guy, he's a monster. But he would have pain, and he wanted to exercise harder. He really wanted to kill, so he would take anti-inflammatories. Well, he wound up having a stent in his heart, and his cardiologist told him, you can't keep taking those medications, because that, you know, you're a perfect, you know, not an extra ounce of fat, no cholesterol, no damage in his blood vessels. So joint dysfunction then is inappropriate control of a joint. It can become restricted or unstable. It creates faulty mechanoreceptor input. So you have sensors in and around the joints. Those are the mechanoreceptors. They detect stretch, compression, deformation, laxity. And it results in increased nociceptor input. What's nociceptor input? Well, nociceptor has to do with pain and damage to tissue. We sense that. That's what produces pain. Damage to tissue. Tissue that is threatened. Pain is your gift, people. Pain is what tells us something is messed up, that we have to fix it. Does it mean I need a pill? It means I need to intervene in some kind of way that's going to help me to heal myself. And I don't heal anybody. You know, I did a kind of a walk in as trying to learn how to be a healer. I spent 10 years with Indian medicine men, going to sweat. I'm really fully cooked. I'm not as half-baked as I seem. I've been in over 500 sweat lodge ceremonies, 9 vision quests. Then I discovered, okay, I'm done with that, but I learned a lot about healing. And I also learned enough to know that I don't heal you. You know, I learned enough that I could be part of your team to help you heal yourself. Any practitioner, that's all we can do if we don't mess you up. So we have to be, you know, that journey. But nociception and pain then results in more information to the nervous system that changes your strategies of compression around the articulations. Strategies of compression. I love that. I like to say it in Spanish. Estrategias de compresión. I like the way that feels, huh? I love Spanish. I really need to learn a lot more, though. But that's one of my favorites. So, joint restriction results in tissue breakdown. Now here's something to really think about. Your joints, your knees, for instance. I drew a knee in the front. Articular cartilage is thickest in the areas of the highest stress in normal joints. So articular cartilage, that's that cartilage that's in those joint surfaces. That cartilage can break down. That cartilage is it's a different kind of tissue. It's thick, it's shiny, it's smooth, it's lubricated with synovial fluid, and it's like the ball bearing. And we need that to work properly. We need to do what we can to keep it healthy. Okay, so abnormal load and transfer results in areas of stress that do not match the thickest articular cartilage. So like in somebody like me, I have a tendency I'm bearing more weight on my long leg side than my short leg side. I have a tendency, my leg actually wants to deform itself to try and level me, okay? And that affects me all the way down to the feet. It affects me all the way up to the neck. If I don't wear a lift in my left shoe, and I can't correct the whole difference because I got, you know, 1.5 inches difference between the legs, but I get migraine headaches if I don't have a lift in my shoe. What's the real, my foot to my, you know, but it's just like the chimney that's sinking on one side. But I have a lot less trouble if I wear a lift. And if I keep my joints flexible and if I keep myself strong, I have to exercise. And it's really hard for me to go to a chiropractor because in Mexico there's 350 or so licensed chiropractors and a lot of people that call themselves chiros that aren't really in the club. So faulty compression strategies result in failed load transfer. This is important, how we bear the weight. So this changes everything. Upright. It results in decreased mechanoreceptor. So it kind of shuts off. It becomes, we have a couple of phenomena going on in relation to pain and dysfunctional joints, okay, especially more chronic pain. One is that we turn off the mechanoreceptors, a dysfunctional joint. Also, the muscles and tissues around it, the signals get changed. We get something called inhibition. Then the muscles stop working. And then they become weak, or they become weak. Who knows which came from, you know, they're together. It's like the yin-yang paradox. Yin does not exist without yang. The chicken and the egg came together. I don't care what anybody says. And fool, one hand does not make a sound when it's clapping because it won't clap. The simple, you know, obvious. So you get the decreased mechanoreceptor. You get increased nociceptive, increased pain in the joints, okay, or in relation to the joints. Another phenomena that you get is sensitization. At the spinal level that innervates this painful joint, your body produces more cells. There's something called neuroplasticity. Plasticity means change, can change the nervous system. You get new cells between the messenger cells, and you become sensitized to pain, which means a little bit of pain is increased in sensitivity. You feel more pain as a result of that sensitization. So people with chronic pain, especially when we look at a visual analog, scale, again, you're caught in a cycle. So you get inhibition, you get more dysfunction. So the idea in healing is to wake up the functions again. Strengthening, postural changes, alter the weight bearing on the joints. So we're really talking about our biomechanics, about our joints. Within joints, muscles, and tendons, and even in the surfaces, are the mechanoreceptors which give the central nervous system info about position and movement. Proprioception. Proprioception is how I know where I am in space. And it's interesting from my viewpoint in trying to help somebody to get upright. Because somebody that's been like this for a long time, not only is their proprioceptive sense altered, this is what they're used to, this feels normal. So when we get them up here, the nervous system says, what the heck is that? What the heck is that? Anybody remember that routine from Saturday Night Live? It was a Saturday Night Live routine. Anyway, but that's really what happens. You feel strange. And a lot of people, that once they come upright, they actually feel like they are falling backwards. And they're just upright. I tell people, and you should do this, if you think you have a postural problem, relearn where upright is. Stand next to the wall. Get yourself upright. Visualize. It's hard, it takes an effort. Nobody in the world has good posture without thinking about having good posture. It's a decision. Posture is a decision. Otherwise, we're like this. So it's becoming aware. Now, okay, so you get up here, and for the first month, your nervous is, what the heck is that? What is it? You'll get used to it, and then at least you'll catch yourself when you're here. So, but it's a decision, and then it's a habituation. So the bad posture is a habit, and we can create. Habituation is a nervous system phenomena. It's a whole body phenomena. And so we do have to struggle to change our bad habits. Isn't that wonderful? There's always something else to do. There's always another step for us. Never boredom. Never boredom. And then, as I said earlier, the nociceptors give the brain information on tissue damage. I do this I actually have a lot of this in PowerPoint. But Jim said I couldn't use PowerPoint out here, and he's right, I can't use PowerPoint. But I do this a lot with the chiropractors that I lecture to. And then the brain establishes, as a result of the input, the recruitment of different muscles, and changes the strategies and the movement patterns. And so based on improper and deformation of the tissues, if the joint restriction is hypomobility or hypermobility, then we get the control information that goes into the body is inaccurate, and it's like we're caught in this cycle. And how do we get out of it? Look, my kitty in the bag, how do I get out? Anyway, the receptor pools are in concentration in the parts of the joint that bear the most weight, where the articular cartilage is the thickest. And then it results in your nervous system, aside from just you standing on your feet, results in the strategies of compression. So we want to figure out how to get into this cycle and change it. And which means that we have to activate muscles that are sleeping. We have to strengthen muscles. If somebody has a sacroiliac problem, we have to strengthen the gluteal muscles. Or we have to look at muscles. We're all seated here. You're all seated. I'm standing. But the more we sit, we have a muscle group, for instance, the iliopsoas, very commonly shortens up, especially with sitting. The psoas connects from L1, 2, 3, and 4, runs through the pelvis, and connects right here. It's a hip flexor. Well, the more time we spend like this, seated, it shortens up. And then, and when it's short and tight, it actually inhibits the signals that go to the gluteal muscles. Results in, first of all, when you see people with this kind of posture, a lot of time it's because their psoas is so short and tight. And actually the psoas will refer pain right to the buttocks. So what's the strategy? Get that baby stretched out. Is it going to stretch all in one day? It's not. Do you have to work on it 3 times a day with stretching exercises? You bet. 30 seconds, on each side. So if that, in fact, is tight. Or maybe it's the other hip flexors, the rectus femoris. Okay, now the iliopsoas will cause knee pain. The iliopsoas will cause pain down the leg and mimic the pain of a disc herniation. And then, of course, you have the rectus femoris, which connects the hip, the front of the hip, not the true hip joint, but the front of the pelvis, to the knee. Also in dysfunction, changes the mechanics, results in knee problems. Then all of these problems, for instance, well, the knee is the real vulnerable joint in the kinetic chain. And so we want to make sure that every part, that the feet work properly. All the joints in the feet need to be functional. If you have too much, everybody know what pronation is? The flat feet. The feet flare out, and that affects the kinetic chain, results in a lot of knee problems, arthritis in the knee. Too tight Achilles tendon, the Achilles, that heel guy, that connects to the calf, results in knee issues and feet issues, plantar fasciitis. So you've got all of these. We're really complex. I mean, we could talk for hours and days and not even get close to the functions, of how to help ourselves. It's an ongoing discovery process. It certainly is for me an ongoing discovery process, including my, I frequently talk to my patients and say, golly, why do I have to be blessed with all the same conditions that my patients have? It is so I can learn how to help other people, but I don't really want it, But anyway, so what do? I think the major message for all y'all, which is more than one person, right? Y'all is one and all. Anyway, for all y'all is, sure, okay. If I were to give you a few tips around degenerative joint disease, one is do not smoke. Smoking destructs these tissues. Musculoskeletal injuries are far worse in smokers than in non-smokers. A rotator cuff tear is about 5 times as long in a smoker as opposed to a non-smoker. So health then really is a decision for all of us to do the right things. I'm a proponent of the anti-inflammatory diet or support proper inflammation diet. Plenty of fruits and vegetables, adequate protein, not too heavy on the inflammatory foods, which are sugars and grains and those kinds of things tend to be pro-inflammatory. And then other people have their own sensitivities. So, really a good, sensible, intelligent desire. But don't smoke. Anybody you see that's smoking is really making a decision to fall apart in more ways than the, so what is it? Who's in charge of this body? Is it like, for instance, the cigarette? Or me, soul? Me, soul. I am soul. You are soul. I'm not this body. We're leaving these suckers behind. Nobody gets out walking. You said that too, didn't you? Yeah. Nobody gets out, as they say, dépié. So get ourselves upright and activate, strengthening. Strength training reverses age-related changes within the muscles. Now, if you're going to strength train and you think about sending energy to that muscle to contract, and just don't do it mindlessly and lift like this, but then contract, we even wake up more. Strength in muscles is a function of 2 things. One is we're tearing down and building up. The other third of strength is the connection between the brain and the cells of the muscles. So when somebody starts strength training, actually you're waking up the muscles. You're waking up fibers in the nerve connections to the muscles. And we need muscle strength. We need that stability to keep from having back problems, to keep from falling down and breaking things. We need to be aware of our core strength. So, how many more seconds? I guess, I think I have about another hour of But let's open to a couple of questions, huh? Anybody? Questions or good jokes?
Wait for the mic, please. I'll bring you this one for the time being.
Mike, are you here? No. Who's Mike? Anybody out here? Mike? We got a mic? Mike?
Can you tell us a little bit about the, and now I can't think of the name of it, but it's the longest muscle in the,
Right next to the speaker. Come back this way.
the longest muscle in the body that runs down the leg?
You mean gracilis, sartorius, tensor fasciae lata, iliotibial band?
The one
Like this
that
one.
causes
Or are you talking about the nerve, the sciatic nerve?
the sciatic nerve.
Okay, the nerd. Yeah, that's. Well, you know, the sciatic nerve is sometimes anybody that has a leg pain thinks that they have sciatica. Okay, and true sciatica is compression of that nerve. It's not the only cause of nerve pain. Like I told you before, a dysfunctional psoas will produce and radiate pain all the way down the hip joint. A degenerating or dysfunctional hip joint, and I could just do a lecture on the hip, because why does it degenerate? Where does the dysfunction come from? Well, through our use patterns, then we lose all this mobility. We need every joint to do all the movement that it's supposed to do in order to not degenerate. Tight muscles, tight fascia, tight ligaments, blah, blah, blah. Capsular adhesions result in degeneration. So the sciatic nerve most commonly is pinched either at the intervertebral foramen where the nerves come out, either by one of two things: bony stenosis, which is advanced stabilization arthritis, so we've developed all these bone spurs, or it's a disc herniation that I pointed to in the front. You know, the disc is like a tire. It's a pressurized unit. If it starts to break down, usually breaks down, first stage is dehydration from bad posture, overuse. Okay, did I get close to what you...
Another question?
Tell me what you think the benefits of massage are.
Number one, anything that you do that really feels good, you should probably do more of, you know. Number one. Now, there are many different types of massage. Now, one of the things we know, as a result of all of these kinds of dysfunctions, and because we're this package of tissue, ischemic pressure, a form of massage like acupressure, coupled with stretching, reduces pain and alleviates trigger points. It doesn't necessarily get at the cause, but sometimes it relaxes a lot of the structures, and because we're influencing the fascia, we can get the fascia to relax. Massage is a marvel, una maravilla. It's better in Spanish, isn't it? You know?
In regard to the cane, I have had hip surgery, and I particularly find that if I use the cane, I stand taller because it helps my back. And so I would just like some challenge on the cane. I think for many people, the cane is used for macular degeneration, and especially the cobblestones. But I personally would like to see more people use canes for prevention.
I agree. I think really the key, especially if you're unstable, having that third leg, bringing your horse along, is kind of a good idea. Crucial, though, is to not be using the cane like this. Have the cane long enough and set so you can be more upright. And use it as an extra stability point, as opposed to like that. Because, you know, first of all, when you're like this, kind of where you're looking is where you're going. I learned that from roller skating. I used to teach people to roller skate. And if they're looking down there, so I get people upright from the chiropractic viewpoint and from the roller skater's viewpoint. Where you're looking is where you're going.
We have another question back here.
I will always remember from the time I was a child and taller than all my playmates and trying to be shorter. My father put a little sign in the kitchen, and every time I would come and go from the kitchen, I would have to look at that sign. And what it says was, stand up tall, girls, or you'll be sorry.
Period.
And that was 100 years ago.
You know, posture is very much cultural. I worked with Chinese doctors in my office in Minnesota for 15 years. Okay. Now, they teach their children that they need to be upright. Of course, it's not 100%, but the educated people in China and their Confucian society said that this kind of posture is disrespectful to your parents and to yourself. And so it's really taught. So when I hear people and they have terrible backs and necks and coupled with terrible posture, it's like these people were not taught that. They think that they inherited this problem with their back. They didn't inherit it biologically. You look at the whole family, they're like this. I mean, I walk kind of funny like my dad does. And we learn our behaviors, you know, in the context of our families, and posture is one of them. So your dad gets a gold star. You hear that, Dad?
Parker has one.
Hello, I'm interested in the sleeping end of it. Most of us sleep about 8 hours. And what kind of a mattress
Keep the
do we
mic
need?
close to your mouth.
What kind of a mattress do we need? Do we need a Tempur-Pedic? Do we need a straight board? Or do we need something downy and soft that we can cuddle in at night? And what does it do to our posture, all this bedding at night, you know, and the length of time we sleep?
One answer is who the heck knows. Okay. The other answer is what I believe, especially as we age and our tissues are not as forgiving as when we were younger. I think we need a level of firm support, but I think we need something cushy on top of it to be a little bit, that's what works for me. And I can only say I sleep best if I've got a firm support for the normal curves in my spine, and I tend to be a side sleeper. If I sleep on my back, I snore more. I don't snore on the side too much. And so I need that support for the hips, and yet I need it, and my shoulders. And so it's hard to, you know, and every band has their dogs, and every brand has their ones that are appropriate for you. I think you just have to try out beds, stay in a lot of hotels, and look at the brands and sleep better on.
We have time for one more question over here.
What is your opinion of the shoes that I call rockers that many manufacturers are putting out today? They're supposed to improve your posture and work your buttocks.
Okay, I have two opinions. One is they may be terrific and they may be scientific evidence to support their use, and they're also supposed to be for exercise. To me, they're damn strange. I mean, I just don't really see, I mean, to me, it's just like, you know, everybody's looking for these new advances, and I'll tell you what, I don't really think that in our biomechanics that there's really anything new. And we need strength and flexibility, and I suppose if you're using them for exercise and you're walking more, then it's going to result in you being stronger and maybe provide a benefit. I'm not the kind of guy that likes gimmicks.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your
Thank
presentation.
you.
Victor will stay around for questions afterwards, right?
Sure.
Okay.